Hey everyone, my name is Sean, and in today's video I'm going to be giving you a deck profile for Invoked. Invocation or Invoked archetype is arguably one of the best fusion based archetypes in the game right now. Definitely way up there as a top tier strategy. But also, it's also a very beginner friendly deck, and particularly if you're someone that's returning to the game and you were maybe once familiar with how fusion summoning works, and yet you don't know necessarily some of the newer mechanics, this is actually not a bad place to start because the deck is actually fairly simple and fairly straightforward. So I'm going to quickly give you a rundown on how Invoked worked, and then we're going to go into some gameplay. So the Invoked engine is very small. Most of your monsters that you're going to be using are in your extra deck, and I'll talk about what these do in a little bit from now, but first I'm going to explain to you how it works. There is only one monster you use in the Invocation engine in your main deck, and that is Alistair the Invoker. Alistair the Invoker works that when it is normal summoned, you can add to your hand a copy of Invocation. Invocation is his form of polymerization, but what makes this spell card different from a regular polymerization is that you can use materials from either player's graveyard to fusion summon your monsters. But also, if you use a material that's on the field or in the graveyard, or either player's graveyard, those cards are banished instead. So you've got to be able to kind of keep that in mind. But it is also a kind of a good way sometimes to counter certain strategies, where if your opponent is relying on having certain cards in the graveyard, you can get rid of it and not have to deal with that as a threat. So it is actually a really cool card. Now, there is a mini loop between Alistair and Invocation, and how it works is every time you use Alistair to fusion summon, ideally you want to get him into the banished pile so that you can use Invocation's graveyard based effect. Invocation, when it is in the graveyard, can allow you to shuffle it back into the main deck in order to add a banished Alistair back to your hand, and that's the loop. Every single turn you're going to normal summon Alistair, get your Invocation, then you're going to play Invocation, banish Alistair, and then use Invocation to get it back to your hand. And that's why this deck works so well. Once you get access to one copy of Alistair and one copy of Invocation, you can just loot them again and again, almost ad infinitum, assuming that you don't kind of break your own loop or your opponent finds a way to stop you from doing it. Now, so between these two cards, that is really the main form of your deck. But then we also have their own field spell called Magical Meltdown, and this is a searcher for Alistair. When this card is activated, you can add one Alistair the Invoker from your deck to your hand. Magical Meltdown also has the effect that the activation of your cards and effects that include an effect that fusion summons a fusion monster cannot be negated, and also your opponent's cards and effects cannot activate when a monster is fusion summoned this way. Basically, your opponent cannot negate your Invocation when Magical Meltdown is activated, so they cannot counter with a counter trap like Solemn Judgment or something similar, or Solemn Warning or something similar to that. So Magical Meltdown is actually a very powerful protection spell that makes sure that your Invocation almost always goes off. Not always, but mostly always. So getting to this engine is actually very important, and we want to access it ASAP in order to get your deck going. So we also play one copy of Terraforming in every Invocation deck, so you can search out your Magical Meltdown. And then we also have another unique card for the deck called the Book of the Law. The Book of the Law is a quick play fusion card where you tribute one of your invoked monsters, and special summon one invoked monster from your extra deck with a different original attribute from that monster. That special monster is treated as a fusion summon. You can only activate one Book of the Law per turn. So this is just another way to fusion summon your monsters using your fusion monsters already as a material. Now, we'll talk we'll come back to the other cards in the main deck, but we'll talk about the cards that you're trying to summon themselves. All of the invoked monsters that you're summoning through Invocation are made by using Alistair the Invoker and a monster of a certain attribute. For your dark monsters, you have Caligar. For your wind monsters, we have Raijin. For your water monsters, we have Corsitus. Fire monsters, you can make Purgatrio. For earth monsters, you can make Magalenka. And then for your light monsters, you can make Mekabar. As you can see, there's 3 copies of Mekabar in here because it is the best card, because Mekabar's effect allows you to negate spells, traps, and monster effects by discarding the same type of card from your hand to the graveyard. And that's why we have so many copies of this. The second best card in your deck is Purgatrio. Purgatrio gets a 200 attack boost for every card your opponent controls and can attack every monster your opponent controls, and also does piercing damage if they're in defense position. This is what helps you kind of put a lot of damage on board and almost try to kill your opponent as fast as you possibly can. And so we play 2 of them. The rest, to be honest with you, are kind of flavor. You don't really need to use them. I've tried to include just 1 copy of them each, just because I wanted to show them to you. But in many deck builds, if you ever look at this online in other people's profiles, you'll probably not see them playing things like Cositas or things like Raijin or Kanigar. It is very much dependent on the meta and what you're playing against. And so, if your opponent's not really using water monsters, you might not want to make this monster at all. The other monsters here they're okay, they're kind of okay, but they're not too good. Kanigar is fairly weak. He only has 1000 attack and 1800 defense, so it can be destroyed by battle quite easily. However, its effect is pretty good, and that is if a player's monster effect attempts to activate, none of that player's monster effects can activate for the rest of the turn while this card is face up on the field. So yeah, it basically says each player can only use 1 monster effect per turn, so it can be kind of useful, but it is very easy to destroy. Raijin is very cool. I like Raijin a lot. The only thing is that he's a wind monster, and you don't really see wind monsters that often in the game. But his effect is that once per turn during either player's turn, you can target a face-up monster on the field and change it to face-down defense position. Cositas is easily probably the most useless one, because his effect is just not that good. He has 1800 attack and 2900 defense, so it is a nice wall. But the way this card works is that it cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, and your opponent cannot target this card with card effects. This card can attack while in defense position, and if it does, apply its attack for damage calculation. It's an okay effect, and if you're playing against certain strategies, like Sky Striker comes to mind, then you may be able to make this because they use water monsters quite a bit. And also they like to target your cards so you can kind of have protection from there. But it's not really that good of a card, so I don't really ever summon this monster. Megalenica has no effect, he's just a big 3000 beta, but he is actually quite nice to combine with the Book of the Law, because if you attack, let's say with a Purgatrio, attack all of the opponent's monsters, you can then use the Book of the Law in order to summon him out, and then there's another 3000 attack monster on your field that you can attack with, maybe even directly into go for game. So he's actually kind of nice just to put big damage on the board, but again, because he has no effect, his usefulness really kind of doesn't apply too much. Now, Raijin, Kanigar are both level 5 and level 4, which means they can also be summoned with instant fusion. And so we run a small instant fusion package with also Millennium Eyes and Thousand Eyes Restrict. So we have a variety as a little bit of a toolbox there, where if you want to negate monster effects, you can summon Millennium Eyes Restrict. If you want to take a monster from your opponent's field, play Thousand Eyes. If you want to stop your opponent from activating more than 1 card, or if they've already activated a card, and you don't want them to use any more monster effects, you can summon Kanigar. And then if you want to flip something face down, you can use Raijin. A really cool interaction with this is if you play Instant Fusion, normally the monster you use or you summon with Instant Fusion will be destroyed in the end phase, but if you have Raijin, you can flip it face down and protect it from being destroyed. Now we have a small Link monster package here as well. Not very many monsters, but we have a few. We have Salamangreat Almirage, whose main purpose is to send Alistair the Invoker to the graveyard. So when you normal summon this, you make Salamangreat Almirage to put him in the graveyard, so then you can banish it for your invocation. He's also a fire monster, so it's a nice way to make Purgatrio quite easily. And yeah, that's really all he is there to do. Alistair the Madness, Invoker of Madness, is Alistair in a hyped up Link monster form. This used to be very important to play in the previous Master Rule, but you don't really rely upon it that much now, because now we're back to a format where fusion monsters can be summoned to the main monster zone quite easily, but it still is a little bit useful. This card's name becomes Alistair the Invoker while on the field or in the graveyard, so you can use it for fusion materials as Alistair. If a monster is fusion summoned while you control this monster, you can discard 1 card, and if you do, add 1 Invocation or 1 the Book of the Law from your deck to your hand. So this is a way to search out the Book of the Law. It does also have a final effect that we don't really use, and that is if this face-up card you control leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, you can add 1 Omega summon from your deck to your hand. A Mega Summon is a trap card for the Invocation archetype. It's a bit slow, but you can play it if you really want to, and it is here. Its effect is that you can target any number of your banished Invoke monster with different names, and special summon them in defense position. You don't really get to use it too much, so people don't really play this card, and also the requirement for your opponent to send this card to the graveyard by a card effect isn't really going to happen because he's only 1800 attack, so players are most likely just to attack over it, so we don't really play it for that effect. Another link monster we have, which is kind of cool to use, is Cross Sheep. Cross Sheep takes 2 monsters with different names, and if a monster is special summoned to a zone this card points to, you can apply the following effects in sequence based on the type of card that this card points to. So if a fusion monster is summoned to a zone this card points to, you get to special summon 1 level 4 or lower monster from your graveyard. That is again not really that useful for this deck, but it's sometimes okay. It can just give you more monsters on the field in order to say link off with, but it's really not that good. These are really mainly from the past format where you had to have more link monsters on field in order to summon more fusion monsters, but really you don't really need these cards, I'll be honest with you. The final card we have is Nightmare Phoenix, and it's just their spell and trap removal in order to do that. So yeah, that's it. So you may be wondering, well, Sean, your deck looks kind of incomplete. Well, this is the main thing I wanted to kind of highlight with Invocation, and the reason why I wanted to cover this deck today is because the Invoked deck core is so very small, you can really mix this archetype with many other strategies. And basically, as long as you can combine it with a strategy that doesn't rely on the normal summon, so you can normal summon Alistair every turn to keep on getting your Invocation, this deck kind of works well with almost a variety of different strategies. Now in today's video we're going to keep it pure as possible and keep it straightforward, but in the future I want to show you how this deck can become really powerful by combining it with other deck strategies, but that won't be for a little while until we've done some more deck profiles. So to help us out here, in order to get Alistair the Invoker a little bit quicker, I'm going to add a couple more cards. We're going to add more field spell searching because I want to play set rotation just to get Magical Meltdown almost as fast as possible, and also Metaverse. Now with set rotation I always like to play 5 spell cards, 5 field spell cards. So we've got Mystic Mind and the Seal of Orichalcos. The reason why we play the Seal of Orichalcos is so that we can give our opponent the seal, and then they have to if they play a field spell card deck, they have to activate this card before they can activate a new one. But when they activate this card, it will destroy all special summon monsters they control, and then it says you cannot special summon monsters from the extra decks, so it can really hurt your opponent. So giving it with set rotation is actually really quite nice. But otherwise it's just there. Otherwise if you draw it early, you can discard it with Mechaba to negate a spell card. And yeah, that's the main core we're going to go with, and we're going to mix it up with a couple of other cards that will work nicely with this deck. Now, because you want a variety of monsters with different attributes, cards that work really well for that are things like hand traps. And so I've got 2 copies of Ash, 3 copies of Veiler, and 3 copies of Nibiru that you can send, that they can discard themselves to the graveyard and sit in the graveyard ready and waiting to be made for fusion summons. And as you notice here, we've got quite a lot of lights, and then we've got 2 fires because that's what the monsters we really want to make with Purgatrio and Mechaba. I've also got some Kaijus as well, because one thing your monsters don't really do is, while Mechaba can be really good to negate, your monsters don't really have ways to just remove cards off the field, and that's one of the biggest weaknesses with the Invocation archetype. So I wanted to add monsters that could just break cards, that could just break boards, but also are useful on their own, and Kaijus kind of fit that bill. So we've got Humongous, which is Earth, Raiden, which is Dark, Dogora, which is Fire, Gardevoir, which is Wind, Gameciel, which is Water, and Jizariku, which is a Light monster. Combined with that, we've also got 2 copies of Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, which can destroy all monsters on the field and then summon 2 Kaijus from your deck. So it's another way to kind of just get your Kaijus to the board. Ideally with this, you want to give them a weak attack Kaiju like Gameciel and give yourself a strong attack Kaiju like Jizariku, so that you can attack over that monster. As well as being able to destroy monsters on the field, we also have Cosmic Cyclone, which can banish face down cards on the field, or even face up cards as well if you choose to. And then we've got 3 more trap cards with infinite impermanence. I've tried to balance this deck around Mecha really, and so I put in a majority of monsters so we can negate monster effects, spell cards so we can negate spell effects, and then just a couple of trap cards because I'm not really expecting to play against too many trap decks. But if you were expected to play against more back row heavy decks, you would want to include more trap cards so Mechaba can negate more trap cards. But that's up to you. This is what I'm going to go with from the start. So we've rounded a deck here, kind of done enough of an explanation here. Let's get into some action and I'll show you how this deck works in a very brief sense. Right, so let's get into a live duel and let's talk about what Invoked do and how they actually perform in action. Now, this duel is not going to be anything too spectacular. It's not going to be very complicated, and we're going to be able to really just demonstrate how this deck works because I managed to actually open all of our cards in our opening hand, which isn't very normal. It doesn't happen very often, I promise you that. But at least, at the very least, I'm going to be able to show you how Alistair works and what the basic loop is. So my opponent here, Death Defy really, is playing Magician's Souls. He activates it to send a level 6 or higher spellcaster monster from his deck to the graveyard, and that is going to be Dark Magician. So we're playing against another Dark Magician player here, and Dark Magician's okay. It's a decent enough deck, but it's definitely not incredibly competitive, and yeah, it's not going to give a deck like Invoked too much of a challenge, in my opinion. It might get lucky, you might get a couple of hits in there, you know, get a couple of, I got some good hits in though, right? Yeah, no, it's not going to really, Dark Magician is okay, it's a good strategy, but it's nothing to really write home about. And so yeah, he normal summons Magician's Robe. I don't think Magician's Robe is that good of a card. If you're playing Dark Magician, I have my own deck profile, and if you want to go check that out, you can see me using what I think are the best way to play Dark Magician, but I don't think Robe is up there at all. I don't think it's that very good. But anyway, who cares about Dark Magician? Let's talk about Invoked. So we're going to start our turn here going second. We're going to play Cosmic Cyclone to get rid of his face down back row card. And DD3D is going to respond with Magician's Robe effect to discard a spell or trap card to summon a Dark Magician from his deck. Don't know why. I don't know why I'm turning this into a Dark Magician commentary, but for those, I know Dark Magicians are a popular deck, but the goal of a Dark Magician deck isn't just to put Dark Magician on the board. You don't get anything by having a 2500 vanilla monster on the board. You benefit off of it by having him on the board in order to trigger other effects, whether that is your Exceed play, your Fusion Summon, your Magician's Magical Circle, or whatever. You don't just throw Dark Magician on the board willy-nilly. But anyway, Cosmic Cycle gets rid of Magician's Navigation, so I'm not going to have to worry about that card being able to negate my effects. And so what we're going to do here now is we're going to normal summon Alistair. Now normally, when we normal summon Alistair, it lets us add Invocation from our deck to our hand, but I already have all the Invocations. Now the reason why I'm still normal summoning Alistair despite having nothing to search is because when I fusion summon Alistair, if he's on the field or in the graveyard, he will be banished, and that's where you want him to go. Whereas if he's in your hand, he'll just go to the graveyard, and that's the only way you want him to go sometimes. Now the reason why I normal summoned him was so that I can link him off into Salamangreat Almirage, who is a fire monster, and so now Alistair and a fire monster are going to be able to fusion summon together to make Invoke Purgatrio. And this is your best monster you want to make when you want to put damage on the board and your opponent has more cards than you do, because he gets 200 attack for every card your opponent gets, and so with 3 cards on the field, he gets 600 extra attack, and that is going to take him from 2300 to 2900, enough to be able to attack over Dark Magician here and deal 400 damage in total. But it doesn't end there. Purgatrio has the ability to be able to attack all of my opponent's monsters, and that's why he is so good on the offense. So we're going to do another 200 damage to Dark Magician and attack and destroy that, and then we're going to attack into Magician's Robe and attack it to destroy that, doing 1800 damage. Now, because we have this card already in our hand, we may as well take advantage of this situation. We have a direct field, and so I'm now going to activate the Book of the Law, which is going to allow me to do another quick fusion summon. And it's going to send this card to the graveyard in order to summon out another card. Now, if I was able to go for game, I would just summon out an Invoked Mega Lanica, the Earth Monster, which has 3000 attack, but that's not enough to go for game, so there's going to be another turn, there's going to be a follow-up play, and so we're going to go for Invoked Mechaba, because Mechaba is your best monster, and it has a form of negation. Now, My opponent, Invoked Mechabite, is able to negate any effect and banish it as long as I discard a similar type of card. So if DD3D activates a spell, I discard a spell, I can negate it. If he activates a monster, same thing. And so I use Invocation's Graveyard effect to get the banished Alistair back to my hand and shuffle Invocation back into my hand. So Mechabite is now able to negate either one spell or one monster. Now here, he is going to activate Dark Magic's Curtain, which is going to half his life points. Again, this card is terrible. You should not be playing it in a Dark Magician deck. It's not like Heroes, where you can say summon out a Elemental Hero Shadow Mist and then search out Marsh Change by special summoning it, where you actually get benefits and able to actually enter your engine. Using Dark Magic Circle does not get you really a good benefit. You're getting a 2500 vanilla. It's not that good, and so I'm not going to negate that. There's no point doing this. So half your life points if you want to. I will, however, negate the activation of Soul Servant. So we're going to discard an Invocation and use Mechabite's effect to negate and also banish it. This is really important because cards like Soul Servant have graveyard effects, and if he went to the graveyard, he would be able to actually draw more cards from his deck. He would actually be able to draw one actually, because it's only just Dark Magician in his graveyard. And so we negated it and we've also banished it, so he no longer has access to that resource. Now we're going to really set up our turn and really get ready to go for game, because we're in such a good position here. So we need to be able to attack over Dark Magician, and I need a monster which is strong enough to do that. Now, I have Purgatory in the graveyard, but that will only get to 2500 attack with its attack boost because he only has one card. I have no way to access Magalegnica, so I need to be able to attack over a Dark Magician and get an attack boost. And so we just used Alistair's in-hand effect, where you can discard it from your hand to the graveyard and give one of your fusion monsters an attack boost of 1000. And so now Mechabite is going to have 3500 attack. Now that Alistair is in the graveyard, we're going to be able to fusion summon it using my Nibiru and also my Alistair in order to summon another copy of Mechabite to the field. At this point, it doesn't really matter. We've got game here, and anything is going to just do enough damage. So it could have been, I could have summoned Caliga probably and done enough damage by banishing one of his Dark Magicians. And yeah, this is going to be game. This is going to show you to be the end of the game here. So it's, like I said, this wasn't a really exciting game, nothing really back and forth, but I think it works and serves as a tutorial to show you how Invoked worked. You got to see the Alistair loop, you got to see Mechabite in action, you got to see Book of the Law in action, and yeah. The reason why I wanted to cover this deck here today was because in the future, we're going to revisit Invoked and see how it makes some of the best decks in the game by mixing it with other archetypes. But that won't be in the near future, but I wanted to make this video as a reference point. So if you don't know how to play Invoked, I can say go back and watch Invoked and check that out. Thank you guys as always for watching this video. I will see you soon. Take care.